Hello and welcome to Motorsport Radio. I'm Dan Marr. Alongside me is Andy Lloyd, and today just a quick word on the 2018 British GT Championship. The media day just several days ago, and well, a 36 car entry, 13 entries in GT3, 23 in GT4, a fantastic lineup. And Andy, who is a fellow endurance and GT nerd, I would suggest, both entries looking like real quality this year.
Very much so. 36 cars across the total grid, 13 in GT3, 23 in GT4. The series organisers were very proud when they unveiled the entry list today, especially bearing in mind that when we looked at the entry list for the media day, it potentially looked a little bit thin. But that's definitely not the case. A very strong grid across both classes, and very difficult to pick the real front runners going into the first round at Alton Park.
It certainly is going to be quite a difficult thing. And looking at some of the results from even 6 months ago, when we had reports of GT3 was dead and it couldn't sustain itself in England, we were going to have split grids for GT3 and GT4 because we had enough entries for both. And in the end, they remain together. We've still got the wonderful and joined package that we've always enjoyed, and it's going to be tougher than ever, especially with the factory interest and the factory level drivers in GT3, especially 5 Aston Martin Works drivers. And this isn't just we'll send a few junior guys down to go and have a bit of fun. This is serious stuff.
Well, very much so, and I think possibly the other manufacturers looked at what Bentley did last year and said, we want some of this, and have come back with a vengeance. As you say, 5 factory Aston Martin drivers, Team Sorensen, Martin, Adam and Turner. Combine that with Jelmer Berman from Mercedes factory program and Rob Bell as a senior McLaren driver as well. You're actually looking at a total of 7 factory drivers on the grid, and very difficult to pick out of that which Pro-Am pairing is an obvious favourite, quite frankly.
It's a shock of the fact you've got multiple Le Mans class winners, and I think one of them might have an overall win in between them. They might have an overall win between them, I don't know, I can't remember. But there were multiple class victories at Le Mans. You've got victories in Blancpain Endurance Series, you've got multiple champion with Johnny Adam, and I think one of the bigger pieces of news over the last few months as well, Beach Dean, fan favourites are back again. We've got Darren Turner joining up with that team there with Andrew Howard, of course, fan favourite, ELMS regular over the last few years, come back to British GT, and what is effectively the farewell tour for the V12 Vantage GT3, just because obviously they're making a new GT3 car for that for 2019, and the beauty of the WEC's new super season means that we can have they've stretched it out enough so we can have these wonderful factory drivers into the championship. So GT3, as you say, we're not going to be able to pick a winner, but Ryan Ratcliffe as well, who won the GT4 title a few years ago with Rick Parfitt Jr., then coming back to race with Rick in GT3, that's also a really good news story for him.
It's a fantastic story. Rick is a definite fan favourite. He never fails to please when he's speaking in public. He's full of enthusiasm. He wears his heart on his sleeve when he goes racing. Everybody was delighted when he won, and that's not to say they were pleased to see other people lose, but he was clearly the crowd's favourite coming towards the end of last season. I think this year it's going to take time to establish the relationship between Ratcliffe and Parfitt. Appreciating they've had a championship winning season in GT4. I think that relationship between Parfitt and Morris was a very special one last year, and they really gelled and they really got the best out of that Bentley. I hope they can replicate that, and certainly Parfitt is coming back into this season very much focused on that. But nevertheless, I think they're up against some very tough competition this year.
So we've mentioned before the 5 of the Aston Martins, but we've also got a McLaren. We've also got, just for reference, we got one of the McLaren 650S GT3 cars on. We've got the Mercedes AMG, which is the ERC Sport car, which is Lee Mole going up with Jelmer Berman. Lee Mole, again, a regular in the British GT over the last few years. We've got multiple Bentleys. We've got both Rick Parfitt Jr. and Ryan Ratcliffe, as we just mentioned, but we've also got the number 7, which is the Callum McLeod and Ian Loggy car, coming back for this season. They actually won a race last year at Spa, and interesting enough, went fastest in a couple of the sessions on Thursday last week. So they're a hot tip at the moment. We've also got a Nissan GTR But effectively, that's going to be much like the one of the Aston Martin races last year, where they had James Littlejohn and Jack Mitchell running alongside that. That's a silver pairing. That'll be quite interesting with Devon Medell and Struan Moore on the grid. Struan also a Blancpain regular in that car. 3 Lamborghinis as well, and Barwell Motorsport really turning it up a gear compared to last year, where they had a couple.
Very much so, and I think Barwell are absolutely gunning for this title this year. 2 years in a row now, Minshaw and Keane have narrowly missed out on that driver's title. Appreciating that Barwell took the team's championship last year, but they really want that driver's championship, and I think they're really going to be going for it this year.
Especially with former champion Johnny Cocker back. That's quite a big coup.
Very much so. Partnering with Sam DeHaan, who makes his debut in the season this year. I don't think we should have too high expectations of that particular entry, but it could surprise us. Barwell are a very well-run team. The Lamborghini Huracan GT3 is a very well-proven machine now, so it could well surprise us. But certainly if ever team orders or tactics were to come into play, putting 3 cars on the grid is clearly better than 2.
It makes life just that little bit more helpful, I suppose, for them. And Patrick Yadala going up with Leo Mikinski as well from another Blancpain pairing. There's a developing theme here at the moment in GT3, isn't there, of Blancpain regulars filtering down into the British GT series. And that, again, is a very strong pairing which can take... They've done really well in Europe, not raced in Britain for quite a while. However, it's stuff like the Silverstone 500, where they've raced regularly for 3 hours at the circuit, is something they know like the back of their hand.
Absolutely, and they know that car like the back of their hand as well, and they work very closely with Barwell. So again, making their return to the series, but nevertheless could well be up there. I definitely think this is probably one of the most open GT3 grids that we've seen in a long time.
And that's just, I like to say just 13 cars, 23 cars over in GT4, a record 8 different manufacturers entered for this season. In fact, as Andy's very helpfully got a list in front of me, we've got the McLaren with their 570S, which was ever so competitive over the last 2 seasons. Ginetta with a venerable G55 GT4. BMW's brand new M4. We've also got Mercedes' brand new AMG GT4 car coming along with the Nissan back again with the RJN squad. Aston Martin, Jaguar with the Invictus Racing team. So whilst we're debating the fate over one car, Tolman Motorsport, let's go on to them very quickly. They had the one car last year with Joe Osborne and co. However, they've bought not 1, not 2, but 3, including the 4 new McLaren young drivers, which have been included into the entry so far. So they've got the number 4 entry, which is Michael O'Brien and Charlie Fagg, Jordan Albert and Lewis Proctor are in the number 5 car. That, if there was a statement of intent, that has got to be it. I know McLaren have always been very heavily focused on GT4 over the last few years in the series with the 570S. They have, of course, Kieran Haggerty and Sandy Mitchell helped develop the car and make it as competitive as it has been in GT. But that's an interesting question now because they bought 3. That's seriously got to be pushing. Yes,
that is absolutely fascinating. I mean, Joe Osborne made the point this morning at the press conference that he was really there as a senior, now that he is a McLaren factory driver, really there to oversee, as he called them, the kids, but to oversee their young drivers. And certainly they've got some hot shoes in there. Charlie Fagg, who raced in the Ebor GT Maserati last year at Spa and took those 2 fantastic wins. Whether they will be competing for the overall title, it remains to be seen, but certainly as you say, it's a clear statement of intent of McLaren's interest in GT4 and taking that title eventually.
But when you've got 8 or even 9 manufacturers involved in GT4, it's got to be a very competitive thing, especially on a home turf. Speaking of home turf, Jaguar, the F-Type, Invictus Racing, that's a fantastic story again in GT. But just to explain to our viewers who may or not have stumbled on the story.
Well. This was a story that was unveiled at Autosport International in January, where Invictus Racing was started by the founder of the Superdry clothing company as a way to allow ex-servicemen who have been disabled or badly injured to compete at motorsport in the highest level. So they are entering 2 Jaguar F-Type SVRs. They have 2 professional drivers acting as coaches, and the remains of the squad are ex-servicemen. The car is a car that we've not seen on the grid before, and of course these drivers are rookies, and this is their debut season. So certainly I think there's a fantastic story there. It's an immensely courageous effort. Certainly the fans are going to be behind them. The car looks fantastic. The livery is a very smart livery.
Sounds fantastic as well.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great car. It's going to take them time to get up to speed, but you wouldn't expect anything different. But I think we're going to see some really gutsy performances from that team, certainly, and some great stories coming out of them.
And they mentioned at Autosport Show, they were talking about they weren't expecting to be up the front. They knew they weren't going to be up at the front, but I think they were there, as you say, to provide that level of inspiration to sort of injured service people who have suffered a lot, and they will just want to say, well, look, nothing can stop you from doing anything you love. You know, we've seen a lot of these sort of efforts pop up over the last few years, and it's great to see that they are helping these people into doing something that they love so dearly. And it's great to see that they're actually putting in 4 different drivers. So traditionally in British GT you would have 2 drivers per car. What they've done is they've actually put 2 AMs per car for the full season, so they'll swap. So they'll effectively do half of the race meetings each. So just to provide context, we got Jason Wolfe in the number 22 car, but they've got Ben Norfolk and Basil Rawlingson in the first car, Steve McCurley and Paul Weiss in the second, with Matthew George. Matthew George doing quite well over the last few years in GT4 as well. So it's going to be a great thing just to see them get a bit more track experience and competing at the highest level of National GT Series and developing that Jaguar. As you say, it is going to become a fan favourite.
I also think as well that these are individuals who have overcome, for a start they were incredibly well trained and highly skilled professionals in their fields who have overcome incredible odds to get to where they are now. Who's to say that applying that same focus and attitude couldn't surprise us this year with some amazing results, and well done to them if they can.
There's some more great stories. So we've spoken about Jaguar. We've spoken about just a few of the McLarens and Tolman. Equip Verscher actually come in an all-Scottish lineup from a European team. They've come over from one of the GT4 series. Over in Europe, there's the Northern Cup and the Southern Cup. It would take far too long to explain, but they've come over from Europe. Again, that's a really good showing that the European teams are sitting up and taking notice. But Finlay Hutchinson and Daniel McKay in that car, fantastic to see them here as well. Ginetta, we got HHE Motorsport now bringing 2 cars in after the title-winning success in their first year of GT4 competition with the Ginetta, really showing that they've gone well and they're really pushing the boat out with 2 cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Took the title last year, back again this year with 2 cars. Highly experienced team with the experience of winning championships. Who's to say they can't do it again? Definitely.
More great stuff. 2 of the Academy Motorsport cars here as well, 61 and 62. Tom Wood and Jan Jonk, as well as Will Moore and Matt Nicol-Jones. We're used to seeing the second pairing. We're not quite so used to seeing Tom Wood and Jan Jonk, but Jan doing very well indeed.
Yes, Jan was out in the season, the series last year. Again, the Aston Martin Vantage GT4, a very well-proven machine in a very experienced team. Again, expect some surprises, I'm sure, from that team.
And there are going to be surprises aplenty. We've just gone through some of the British GT grid. We'll go through more at Autumn Park in just a few weeks' time over the Easter weekend. That's going to be incredibly busy. I think then we'll get a good picture as to see who is going to be competitive, who might not be as competitive, but with the amount of talent in British GT, with the teams pushing harder than ever, and just the diversity and the quality of the grid throughout this year, we just can't. I would love to sit here and say, well, I think this person's going to win it or this person's going to win it. I just can't. You can't at this stage.
No, I don't think, you can't, definitely. I think that if you were to apply a sort of a bookmaker's logic to it, I think in GT3, I think the winner is going to come from an Aston Martin. I think it could come within the TF Sport camp. I think it very much depends on how quickly Team and Sorensen can gel with Farmer and Johnston. And you would suggest that all 4 are highly experienced drivers, so that's going to happen quite quickly. So I think they're going to be extremely competitive straight out of the block. I think in GT4 it's wide open. I think the team that I think may well surprise us is going to be the Balfe Motorsport McLaren entry, driven by previous champions Johnson and Robinson, who have gone to that team because they know they are McLaren experts. That 570S was beginning to get very well sorted towards the end of last season. I think they could surprise us this year.
Well, that's Andy Lloyd's sort of pickings for the 2018 British GT season. I'm just going to sit on the fence because I don't know. I can't make a prediction because it will just come back to bite me as it normally does. But thank you very much for joining me, Andy.
My pleasure.
I can't quantify just how excited I think either of us are for the 2018 season. And like I say, we're not going to know who's going to be where, who's going to be doing what. But stay tuned to Motorsport Radio to find out when we get underway at Autumn Park for rounds 1 and 2 of the 2018 British GT Championship.
Follow the British GT Championship all season on Motorsport Radio.